Hello, thanks for joining us. We are keeping across the situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which has developed quite dramatically over the last few hours. There have been a number of reports of shootings in the city. It follows unrest there after police shot Jacob Blake in the back on Sunday. This is the third day of protests since there. It's not clear who was involved in the shooting itself, but people took to the streets, as I say, once again, despite a curfew and also despite a call for calm from Mr. Blake's mother. Well, let's get a view as to what has been going on at the scene, because CBS's Pauline Lee gave me the latest from Kenosha.
So, as you've mentioned, this is a third night of protest despite the curfews. And when curfew went into effect, that was really when things started to get intense. That was when we saw something different that we haven't seen the first two nights. Kenosha police in riot gear, as well as the Wisconsin National Guard, going in and effectively moving all of the protesters out into the main street and then pushing them back block by block by block with tear gas, with rubber bullets, just to get them to move back and hopefully disperse on their own. But right around midnight was when they pushed the crowd back maybe 4 blocks from the courthouse. That was when we heard several dozen gunshots rung out, and it sent maybe a couple hundred protesters running in all sorts of directions, just chaos ensuing. We know that several people were shot. Their conditions right now, we're still working to learn those, and we're still working to learn who is responsible at the moment.
So clearly heightened tensions between protesters and police. I think that is evident. But at the same time, there have been other people out on the streets bearing arms who've been within the maelstrom, if you like, of what's been going on.
Yes, that's right. New this evening, we did have a different group out here among the crowd of protesters. They called themselves the group is Protect the Property. So they were out here because they were just tired of seeing all the burning and the looting of the buildings. And so they were here with the intention, they say, to protect the property, essentially what the name entails. And so there were people out here bearing arms, visibly bearing arms, which is a right here in the United States. But obviously here in Wisconsin, we do have the right to conceal and carry as well, but those are just for handguns.
Right. I mean, obviously a lot going on still behind you. What is the situation right now?
Right. So we are actually right in front of the crime scene here. This crime scene is actually several blocks long, and this shooting supposedly started right here, right next to the hospital here. So police officers have been here for about 3 hours now. As I mentioned, the gunshots went off at about midnight. So we're going on about 3 hours. We've seen officers canvass this entire area, just searching for any sort of evidence to lead them to piece together what might have happened leading up to this shooting.
Just to clarify again, Pauline, is there a heightened police presence tonight? Is it more than you've seen in the last couple of days?
Well, there's definitely more Wisconsin National Guard members. Yesterday, we had the first wave of maybe 125. That was doubled for the third day. So we had more Wisconsin National Guard members. But keep in mind, their mission was to just aid the law enforcement here, because obviously they're coming from around the state. They don't necessarily know the area of Kenosha, Wisconsin. So they are here to aid law enforcement that are here to help keep calm in the area, if you will. But you could tell as of this morning that they were anticipating another night of unrest. That's why their tactical plan changed. That's why they pushed everyone away from the courthouse, because for the past 2 days, that was really where most of the tension happened between police and between protesters. So tonight, it was a completely different game plan, but no one anticipated it ending in this tragic way.
No, quite. I mean, there's a lot of video material emerging on social media, on Twitter, and it does point towards quite a lot of tension and confrontation between individuals from different backgrounds. Have you seen any of that?
We've seen a number of it, and we've brought it to law enforcement officials here. They're aware of what's circulating right now, and there's also pictures of the person who is supposedly responsible. They are also aware of those pictures, but in terms of being able to confirm for us if that is the correct person or, you know, any other sort of information, it's so early on in the investigation now. We're just 3 hours in that they haven't been able to tell us that yet.
That's Pauline Lee of CBS. We're also out on the street was Julio Rosas, who's a senior writer for townhall.com. Now, that's a conservative website. He's been in the streets and he was filming what he saw.
So I personally witnessed one of the armed gunmen running down the street, and people from the rioting slash protesting crowd chasing after him. They tried to use a skateboard to hit him from behind, but they weren't successful with that. He then tripped and fell, and that's when the crowd said, "Get him!" And two people, I believe, jumped onto him, and there was a quick power struggle for the rifle. At that point, he fired off multiple rounds, and it hit one of the guys that attacked him in the arm. He was then able to get up and run towards the line of police.
Right. So he got the guy with the gun got up and headed off towards the police.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I mean, we've just been looking at the pictures, which I presume they're your pictures. Sorry, I'm just aware of your contribution to that as well. I mean, that is obviously now a major focal point of what we're all getting to see. What other things were going on around and about? Because certainly within the scope of what you filmed there and some of the other things I've seen and heard, there have been a lot of shooting going on, random shots in various different locations at different moments.
Right. So the whole reason why that whole crowd was in that area was because the police had declared an unlawful assembly in front of the Kenosha County Courthouse. They were throwing bottles, rocks, shooting fireworks at the line of police officers, and so the officers gave them multiple warnings, saying that they were in violation of the curfew and that if they continued to attack them, they were going to respond with tear gas, pepper balls, rubber bullets, and they didn't leave, and so that's why they pushed them far down that street, and then that's where where the first shooting took place at the car dealership was about 2 blocks away from where I shot that second shooting, and then you can also hear in the background multiple shots being fired from behind me.
Right. I mean, it's obviously a very challenging scenario, this, isn't it, in many different ways. How do the police interact with those who've come out on the streets to protect property and prepared to come out armed to do so?
Well, it's not the whole reason why that they're out there armed is because there's a lack of police presence, and that's what we saw, particularly yesterday at the very beginning of the night's unrest. They've been using their firearms to protect some of the businesses, and I actually spoke to one business owner who lost it was the furniture store that they owned was completely burned out, and so they were out there enforced tonight to prevent more of that from happening. And so in terms of the interaction from the police, they actually move away from the officers because obviously when the officers are right next to buildings, rioters have a hard time setting fires or damaging it. So they actually I saw them move away from the area because they didn't see themselves as being needed in that particular area. So that's why they moved down, and then that's where we saw some of the shooting take place.
But were you also aware there were perhaps more police out tonight than there have been before? We heard earlier from Pauline Lee saying certainly more in terms of the National Guard were out this time.
Yes. I saw a different town police officers in the area. I believe I also saw a different county, the county sheriff's department. I believe it was a neighboring. One of their armored vehicles were being used to push the rioters away from the county courthouse. So I can say that in addition to the more National Guardsmen that have been deployed, neighboring localities have provided Kenosha with their policing agencies, because you have to remember Kenosha is a relatively small town.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Julio, just to say, we're looking at some of your footage. You shot that. I mean, I can only imagine that the atmosphere there and the moment this was happening with shots being fired, that must be terrifying. And I just wonder what was going through your mind as you were trying to gather this information, get the material on video, and at the same time, of course, if shots are being fired, everyone in the vicinity is at risk.
Right. So, I mean, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been in Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, New York City. But this was really the first time where shots were fired in multiple directions, because again, there was that power struggle, and the barrel was being moved all around. So I was, in my mind, I was trying to still do my job and just record and report what was happening while also moving to safety. And again, I had to kind of adjust it when I was going away because I heard shots from behind me. So I was kind of between a rock and a hard place for a few seconds there.
Julio Rosas of townhall.com, which is a conservative organization operating in the United States. Well, earlier, the parents of Jacob Blake, he was the black man who was shot by police on Sunday, shot in the back, and the signal, the trigger, if you like, for these protests. His parents appealed for calm and an end to the violence. Our correspondent Aleem Maqbool sent us this report from Kenosha on how the nightly demonstrations against the police have grown.
Another American city turned into a conflict zone after the police shooting of a black man. It was the turn of Kenosha, Wisconsin, to feel the wrath of angry demonstrators. The start of a curfew only made more pour onto the streets to confront police, who reacted with force.
Well, it's got extremely tense since the curfew passed. You can see tear gas, pepper spray being fired by the police outside the courthouse here. It's being thrown back by some of the protesters who've been lobbing plastic water bottles, sometimes even fireworks fired at the police.
And demonstrators were undeterred and caused more destruction. It wasn't long before vehicles were set on fire, even buildings. Many told us they felt this was the only way people would take notice of them.
Feels like a breath of fresh air, honestly, because we finally get to say what we've always wanted to say to them. I've been stopped and harassed by the police many times in my own town, and just because I look like someone that I'm not. And I don't want to feel that way.
Are you prepared to come out for
weeks and weeks, months and months, as long as we get the justice that we need for Jacob?
Jacob Blake seen here walking around his car, followed by two officers. When he opens the door, he's shot several times at close range in the back. His children were in the vehicle at the time.
That man literally just grabbed him by his shirt and looked the other way and was just shooting him with the kids in the back screaming.
They shot my son 7 times. 7 times. Like he didn't matter. But my son matters. He's a human being, and he matters.
Do Jacob justice on this level and examine your hearts.
Yes.
We need healing.
But the protesters didn't heed that plea. By day, it was clear to see the destruction of government buildings and millions of dollars of damage to many private businesses. Not everyone is understanding.
Oh, it's definitely terrorism to me. Terrorism is a violent act with intimidation, with a political gain.
But some of those young people were saying this is the only way they can get their voice heard.
But there's other ways.
Though we still don't have a police explanation for the shooting, it's likely the protests will go on, particularly as we get to know more about how it's all affected the life of Jacob Blake. Aleem Maqbool, BBC News in Kenosha, Wisconsin.